Hello everyone, it's Brianna. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a quick February book wrap up. I read I think 6 or 7 books this past month. I think 6, and I know that's not a lot for booktube. Some people are like, I read 30 books this month, which is crazy to me. I think the last time I read that many books in a month was probably when I was like 11, before school destroyed my love of reading. Now we're building back up from scratch, so I went from reading a ton when I was a kid to reading nothing in the later years of high school and in college, because I was just like brain fried and tired of all like the AP classes and of being in university and reading a bunch of stuff that I didn't like. So like I said last time I made my first booktube video, it's a process, right, getting back into it. So I'm actually quite proud of my 6 books. So even though other people read a lot more, I'm not discouraged. I'm proud of myself. So that's the attitude we're keeping up for this video. Also, in case you're wondering, my ear is now finally healed. She is no longer bandaged. So all those videos you had to suffer with my weird alien ear, it's gone. Now she's good. She's healed and she's fresh. We've washed her. She's doing great. Okay, let's actually get to the video. So the first 2 books I read, I talked about really briefly in my first booktube video. I had read Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. That book, I had given it a 3 out of 5 stars, maybe a 3.5 if I really think about it, just because I would be interested in reading the sequel when it comes out. Ninth House is about a character named Alex Stern, or Galaxy Stern, who kind of gets swept up into the world of Yale University and all of its secret societies that are tied in with a dark magic system. And it's honestly a very hard book to describe, just because I swear to God, not a thing happens in that novel, and it's so long for a book where nothing happens. Basically, she is a sole survivor of a huge tragedy, and then in the midst of all of her personal traumas, she gets sought out by a member of these Yale secret societies and receives an offer to come to Yale and then be a part of their society and kind of get to start her life over. And I thought the premise was really interesting. My main reason why I gave it 3 out of 5 stars was because I didn't connect to any of the characters per se. I feel like Darlington, if you guys read it, Darlington's probably the closest character I could probably say to someone that I really cared about. Also Dawes, I was really interested in. I'm not sure what I felt like. I liked Alex a lot just because we read the most from her perspective, but none of the characters really had a chance to be exciting to me, mostly because nothing happens. I can't even tell you, it's been months since I read that book, and I can't tell you like a single event that happens in it. I genuinely don't remember. Also, I feel like my other complaint was some of the scenes. There's like some graphic depictions of violence, of assaults, and literal shit eating, which I wasn't anticipating. And while that scene in particular, the eating of human feces, was a very revenge porn, justice porn type of narrative, I feel like I still was like, ugh. Sometimes some of the depictions of violence were a little bit gratuitous to me. I felt like they didn't really serve a huge purpose in the story. But if you are a longtime fan of Leigh Bardugo, as I am, or I guess I'm not a longtime fan. I read Six of Crows like last year and then I became obsessed with her. But this book, I think just because I loved Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom so much, I had really high expectations and then they just weren't met. And I can't say that I'm super excited about the sequel coming out whenever it does come out, but it's fine. It's fun. If you have like a spare week to read it, you can check it out from the library. I wouldn't buy it. It's not that much. It's the first 150 pages you're gonna be like, what the hell is this? Because the magic system is introduced to you in such a confusing way. If you wanted a cheat sheet though, at the very end of the book, like after the book ends, there's like a little index that describes to you all the different secret societies and what they do. So I didn't know that going in to the story, and then at the end when I finally got to it and saw the cheat sheet, I was like, if I saw this, if I had seen this 500 pages ago, I would have been so much less confused. But there we are. That was Ninth House. The second book I read that I had mentioned not liking was Loveboat Taipei by Abigail Hing. That was a book that I had read for the Subtle Asian Book Club, which is run by one of my friends Alexandra, Twirling Pages, and my other friend Tiffany. They had picked that book for February, and I went in with super high expectations. I was really excited to read a fun, cute romance story set in Taiwan about a bunch of Asian Americans. That was something that I was really excited for the representation, and I came out on the other side hating it. I finished it pretty early on, I think probably the first week of February, and a lot of the other members of the book club hadn't yet finished it, and the ones who did were like, they loved it, they gave it 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5 stars. I ended up giving it 2 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, but honestly I think I would probably give it closer to a 1 or a 1.5, but I figured I finished it so it wasn't so excruciating that I had to stop, so I gave it a 2 out of 5. But because I was like, oh, it's Asian, so I don't want to give it 1 star and then discourage publishers from publishing more Asian stories by hating on it publicly. But man, I did not like that book. I felt like all of the characters were either flat and boring and just really tropey, or they were flat, boring, tropey, and completely insufferable as characters. The main character, Ever, the book itself is about, I should probably tell you what the book is about, right? It's about this character named Ever. She is a high school senior. She is going to a summer camp, summer program in Taiwan. Her parents are sending her to so that she can get back in tune with her culture and her people and her language. And there she meets a bunch of other Asian Americans, falls in love, makes friends, blah, 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 blah. I feel like the parts that would have made me like the book a lot more if it had shown a lot more Taiwanese culture. I feel like a lot of it, of the Taiwanese and Chinese culture, was referenced in passing or as backdrops to what the drama that was happening, and to be honest, I didn't care about the drama whatsoever because, like I said, I found all of the characters so irritating, and I honestly, if the book had ended with like this insane twist where like all of the characters just died, I would not have shed a tear. I would not have cared. In fact, maybe I would have been happy about it because some of those characters I was like, what is happening? It was so annoying to read. But to be fair to the author, I do think that if I had read this book when I was like 14, I might have loved it. Obviously I'm a little bit older than the target demographic for the novel. I am almost 23, so this book is probably geared more towards 15 to 18-year-olds in high school, but I just didn't like how the book handled some more serious topics. The book does handle issues of domestic abuse, both physical and emotional, and I think the way it was brought into the story, the way the situations were resolved, it was not very gracefully handled, and it really brought me out of the story. A large part of the book revolves around Ever and her parents and how they have this push and pull relationship with her parents wanting her to be a doctor and Ever wanting to be a dancer, and then feeling the need to have to live up to her parents' expectations because they sacrificed so much for her, which I feel like is a really big part in a lot of immigrant children's narratives, mine included, right? Your parents sacrificed so much, so you feel like you need to be at the top of your game, doing everything you can to make sure those sacrifices were worth something, and I think that part of her story would have been so interesting if it was elaborated on more. But most of the book ended up being about her love triangle with these two lame-ass boys who were just the tropiest versions of any characters ever. One was named Rick, and he was the perfect boy. He had perfect grades, he was perfectly handsome, everybody loved him, he's amazing at Mandarin obviously, and Ever's mad about it that he's just like the perfect Chinese son. And the other character's named Xavier, and he's your bad boy, your young adult bad boy. That's it. That's the extent of his character. And then all of the twists and turns that happen in this book were so contrived for me. I was not a fan. Any single time a new plot point came up that was supposed to be interesting, I was just like, I was mad. I was just straight up mad about it. I didn't have a good time. The character that I thought I liked ended up being not great, and then having a very weird arc later on, but no spoilers obviously. If you want spoilers, I will at some point, once I have become less angry about it, write a review of this book and get my thoughts collected. But yeah, this book was just a mess for me. I don't anticipate me reading any more novels by this author for a while unless I hear really good reviews from people that I trust. Alexandra, after she read it too, she was like, what the hell? So I'm glad I'm not the only one who read that and was like, oh. But yeah, that was it was an experience, so I have that on the back burner for now. I do own it. I'm probably gonna unhaul it just because I can't have that in my collection. I just can't. It's like tainting the rest of the books in my collection. It's oh my god, driving me crazy. Okay, next book. So the next thing I read was Renegades by Marissa Meyer. It is the first Marissa Meyer book I've ever read. I know a lot of you guys recommended the Lunar Chronicles series, but I'm not super interested in fairy tale retelling, so I skipped that just to go straight to Renegades because I like stories that have a huge cast of characters, and I was told that one was a good one to follow up with Six of Crows. Not that they're the same, I would say, but just if you like reading from multiple viewpoints and having a large collection of characters to follow. Six of Crows is better writing. That's just true. I have to say that. But I ended up giving Renegades, I think, a 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Honestly, it's probably more like 4.5 out of 5 stars. And if we're speaking objectively, the book itself is probably like 3 out of 5 stars. It suffers from the ninth house problem where nothing happens in the book. It feels like just one long exposition, and then at the end there's a twist so that you can be led into the second book. That book, Renegades, did something that no book has done for me recently, and that is it made me super excited to read. When I had to put it down to go to work or to go to sleep, I was actively sad about not reading it because I just wanted to know what happened next, and I was invested in what was going on even though nothing happens. I was so invested to find out what goes on with my favorite characters. I just liked the atmosphere of it all, and yeah, I hadn't felt that way in a long time, so I think that was something really valuable about the book and probably upped it a lot on my rating scale. So that, I know that's very subjective. A lot of you guys who read the book and heard me heard me criticize Ninth House for nothing happening and then suddenly giving Renegades a 4.5 stars, you guys are like, what are you talking about? But that's just how I feel. Yeah, it was pretty good. Renegades is a story about these superheroes who are in a post-revolutionary world. Before the events of the book begin, there was basically a big revolution led by people who have superpowers called prodigies. Prodigies prior to this time were basically oppressed by people without powers. It's basically a retelling of X-Men by accident. It's not actually inspired by X-Men as far as I know, but you know how people just retell the story of X-Men every like 5 years just with new characters? That's this. So it's a bunch of people with powers called prodigies overthrowing society, the societal system that keeps them oppressed, and then the whole world had fallen into chaos, into anarchy, and then a group rose from the chaos called the Renegades, and they wanted to replace the anarchical system that was in place with something more structured to bring peace and order back to the world. They do so successfully, and the book begins by following the story of young renegades who are continuing on the legacy of the people who started this post-revolutionary world, and it follows the story of a character called Nova, who is what are they called? Who was an anarchist. She was part of the group who had originally started the revolution. So it's following some renegade characters, some anarchist characters, and then it kind of flip-flops between the two viewpoints, mostly between Adrian, who is a renegade, and then Nova, who is an anarchist, and their stories and perspectives on how society is shaping up. I liked that idea a lot of how morally gray it can be when you're trying to put together a new society, about how revolution seems like a good thing, but what happens after the revolution is over? Who leads? I think in that sense it's probably why I liked this story a lot, even though nothing happened. I just liked seeing how the characters dealt with these morally gray issues, how they interacted with each other, how they understood and accepted or learned about new ideas in terms of how to lead a post-revolutionary world. I don't even know, I can't even say I was personally attached to any of the characters that much, but I liked reading about them. I never got frustrated with them where I was like, I hate this character and I never want to read this book again, like I felt with City of Bones by Cassandra Clare, but that's a conversation for another day. That was when I was like 16 and I was like, what the hell is this? But this book, I had a great time. It was a good time, and this review doesn't make any sense. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore, but that time, this book made me love reading again. So for that, major props. It's something super fun and I think easy to read. It took me not too long to read it, probably just a couple days, and it's like 600 pages or something like that. So yeah, I checked out the second book, Arch Nemesis, from the library, and I actually bought Supernova at Target when they were having a sale. So I'm really excited to get to those later in the year. Okay, so the sun is going down and my camera is running out of battery, so I'm going to talk about one last book today, and I'll finish up the rest of the video tomorrow. But the last book I want to talk about in this section is Carry On. I read by Rainbow Rowell. I was really apprehensive to read this book just because the only other Rainbow Rowell book I've read is Eleanor and Park, and as you guys may or may not know, that book got into a bit of a controversy just because of its portrayals, not just because, it's very valid and I agree, because of its portrayals of the Asian characters in the novel and its racism, subtle racism, the fetishization of Asian men and of Asian women. And there's a thread on Twitter that I'll link down below about it, but it made me really nervous about reading another Rainbow Rowell book about how about how she might write more characters in the future, right? Because I wasn't sure. I was like, I don't know. Eleanor and Park was supposedly like her breakout novel. I feel like at the time everyone in my high school was reading it, and I was like, oh, okay. I didn't want to take on this venture, but I had heard from some friends whose opinions that I trust that Carry On was a fun, lighter novel and far less controversial in its topics. So I decided to pick it up, and it is about a character named Simon Snow, who is a wizard, or is he described as a wizard? I don't know. He's a magician. He does magic. He goes to wizard school. So he's a wizard who is the quote-unquote chosen one, and it's kind of a, I don't know if it's an outright satirization, but it's a play on the chosen one narrative. He's actively calling himself the chosen one, realizes he's a chosen one, and decides he's the worst chosen one in history. He thinks he's bad at magic. There are characters in the novel, his friend Penny, who she's a lot smarter, she's a lot more apt at magic, a lot more passionate about it. His roommate Baz, who is his worst enemy, is also really smart and good at magic, and he feels like he's just a flop who was the chosen one by accident. He never grew up with magic, etc. And for the first half of the book, it felt just like a really bad Harry Potter knockoff, and I wasn't really sure how I felt about it. It was fun to read, right? I had a good time, but I didn't feel like it was bringing anything new to the table. I kind of understood what it was trying to do. It was being tongue-in-cheek about the whole chosen one narratives and the hero's journey, but I didn't empathize with Simon at any point in the story when he's talking about the struggles of having all the pressure of like the wizarding world on his shoulders. He's supposed to be fighting this great evil called the humdrum. Is that what the I don't even know. I can't remember now, because I read this book and then it all went in and then it all went out when I finished it. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars for that reason. Nothing in it particularly stuck with me, and I didn't care much for any of the story. Like the storyline, their storyline was boring to me. The romance felt not believable. I wasn't invested in the romance at all, even though I know a lot of people were really excited about the diversity of it because it's an LGBT couple, but I feel like just because your couple is queer does not make it good or well written, and I was not sold on it. I was not interested in it, and it could have just not happened, and I would have had the exact same feelings about the book, which is no feelings at all. And I feel like a book that makes me apathetic is worse than a book that makes me angry. So I don't know. I still gave it 3 stars just because I didn't hate it, didn't love it, so I didn't want to give it anything less than that for not making me feel stuff, right? I feel like that's not fair. But if you just want a fun story to read that's really easy, you'll get through quickly, then Carry On I think could be a great option for you. But for me, I was not invested in any of the characters. It started off and there was like 8 years prior or 7 years of build up that we don't see on the page because it's all told in like these weird flashbacks that Simon has. And it's not even flashbacks, right? It's not in the time, but Simon will be like, in year 3 when we were however old, Baz did this to me. And then it's like that. It's the most juvenile way of writing, and I feel like that was my big problem with the book, and that's why the relationships didn't stick with me, just because the way they were written it felt so childish for a book that was targeted towards older teens. So that was my #1 complaint. But overall, it's fine. It was a book and I read it. I still stand by the fact that it felt like a knockoff Harry Potter, but that is what it is. A lot of books are like a knockoff Harry Potter. Similarly, a lot of books are like a knockoff Hunger Games. That's just what happens when a book in the genre gets really big, right? So we have to deal with that. But yeah, that's how I feel about Carry On. 3 out of 5. Not great, not bad, just is. Okay, part 2 of the same video. I am back from work and we got to do this before the sun sets, so let's get to it. I read 2 more books in February. The first one was The Diviners. This was actually the last book I think I read in February. This story is about a young girl named Evie. I believe she is 17 years old, and she is sent from her small town in Ohio to go live with her uncle in New York City because she messed around a little too much in Ohio, and her parents Fresh Prince of Bel-Aired her and shipped her off to go live with her uncle. And while she's there, she kind of finds out that her uncle is working with the police to try to solve this murder case that happened in New York City. And then it becomes a string of murder cases, and then Evie, who is someone who actually has some powers, some magic powers, thinks that she might be able to use her powers to help her uncle solve these murders. And it kind of continues from there. She meets a lot of interesting people, but I liked Evie a lot. I feel like my biggest qualm about reading young adult fantasy nowadays is I find heroines and young adult fantasies kind of annoying sometimes because I don't know, I don't sometimes they're written to be like hashtag not like other girls, and they're so different, and that's why they're so much better than other girls, and I really don't like that trope. I hate it very, very much. I don't like that. But Evie is great because her and her best friend Maple are extremely different. I love how they are a pair and they are killing it together, and they're so different. Evie loves to party, she loves going out, she loves dressing up. This book takes place in 1926, I think, or like the 1920s, and she's all about flapper culture. So she's wearing her hair short, she's wearing these really pretty dresses, she's wearing these gorgeous rhinestone headbands, and she loves the party life, she loves being in the spotlight, and that's her whole thing, and it's super fun to read. But I liked especially her friend Mabel. Her parents are really big socialists, or they're big social justice activists, and she spends a lot of her time reading, going to these protests, helping her parents do all these things. She dresses more conservatively, she keeps her hair long, and while Evie and her sometimes bicker about it, it's never a thing where one of them thinks that they're better than the other. Mabel never puts Evie down because she likes to party, and Evie never acts like she's better than Mabel because she likes to be more outgoing and out there. And I think their friendship was one of my favorite parts of this book, if not my favorite part. Some people said it was going to be really scary. I didn't think it was scary, but I did think it had this spooky feeling. So if you're into something that's not going to make you like freak out and not want to go to sleep in the dark, but still be kind of that spooky wintry fall vibes, even though we're almost into spring now, but regardless, if you want that feeling, that atmosphere, then I highly suggest The Diviners. I had a fantastic time reading it. Definitely excited to read the others in the series. The last book that I read in February is Anna K by Jenny Leigh. I got this from Book of the Month, and it was an early release actually. So this is, I think this book only just recently came out. It's coming out in March sometime. Maybe it came out today actually, I'm not sure. But this was a modern retelling of Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina. So it follows this main character, Anna K. She is half Korean, half white. She is from the upper echelons of Manhattan. She's very wealthy, and it's basically just a love story. I think this one is really fun if you're just looking for an easy read, something that is exciting, fun, characters that you like and enjoy. Not necessarily that you like them as people, because cheating on your significant other is a very big theme in this book. I swear to God, every single character cheats on their significant other, and it's, I don't know if it necessarily addresses it where it's like this is a terrible thing, but it kind of shows how people stay in relationships out of social obligation, but there's not love there. And then there is a commentary on the double standards in cheating, about how men versus women are viewed when they cheat in a relationship, and that's something that I really found it to be interesting, and I liked that commentary a lot. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads because while I really enjoyed it, the social commentary thing I think was the one thing that I thought was lacking in the original Anna Karenina. I haven't read it yet, even though I did buy it. I literally, after I read this book, I liked it so much that I bought the actual fat Anna Karenina from Barnes & Noble because I wanted to read it sometime soon, because I was so invested in the story and I needed more. I read a 400-page book, now I needed to read the 900-page version. So that's what happened. But I think the original was kind of known or touted as this great socio-political commentary on Russian government and politics of the time, and I think this book kind of starts to touch on social issues in the United States. I mentioned the thing about cheating before. I think it could have done a lot more in terms of the social commentary. I mean, and not necessarily that it has to talk about everything, but I think that was much more minimal. That was much more background in relation to how the relationships are portrayed. So that's what kept me from giving it a 5. Also, I fell in love with the white boy, Vronsky. I get it, you know? This bitch sees him for like 3 minutes at a subway station, and then she's like, maybe I'm in love with him, I'll risk it all. And I was like, what? But then as I kept reading, I was like, yeah, okay, alright. Those were all of the books that I read in February. I'm hoping in March I am doing the Animal Crossing readathon, which I'm super excited about. That starts on the 9th of March and it goes until the 20th. And I listed, I think, 5 or 6 books that I'm gonna read. And then I have a bunch of other books that I got from the library, and hopefully I finish those. And my Animal Crossing readathon books that I picked are not books from the library, they're books that I own. So I think altogether I have a very ambitious list of like 16 or 17 books. Will I read them all? Probably not. But who am I if not someone who sets completely unrealistic expectations for themselves and then gets really sad and disappointed when I don't meet them. Someone started their car behind me. Hopefully you didn't hear that, but it's okay. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Those are my opinions. I don't know what else to tell you. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you like this content. I will see you next time. Bye!